The judge froze when he saw the suspect. It was his own son. The courtroom was already full when Judge Samuel Carter entered. People whispered as he walked past the wooden benches, his black robe flowing behind him like a shadow. For 25 years, he had presided over the most difficult cases in the city: murders, betrayals, crimes that shattered families. He was known as a man of steel, calm, unshakable, a judge who never let emotion touch the gavel. That morning was supposed to be no different. The case was listed as State versus Daniel Carter. He hadn't paid attention to the name. Carter was common enough. Samuel climbed the steps to the bench, adjusted his glasses, and nodded to the clerk. "Bring in the defendant." The side door opened, chains clinked, and then Samuel saw him. The world seemed to tilt. The young man, escorted by 2 officers, lifted his head, and their eyes met. For a single, endless second, neither moved. The face was thinner than he remembered, pale, a faint bruise on the cheek, but there was no doubt it was his son, Daniel Carter, his breath caught in his throat. The courtroom faded into silence, as if someone had closed a door on the world. He could no longer hear the shuffling of papers, the murmurs of the crowd, the clicking of cameras. All he could see was the boy he had once taught to ride a bicycle. The boy who used to fall asleep on his chest during late-night movies. The boy who had left home 5 years ago after a bitter argument and never truly come back. And now he stood there in chains. Samuel's hands gripped the edge of the bench. "No. This had to be a mistake," the clerk spoke. "Your Honor, the defendant is present." Daniel looked up again, his eyes filling with something between fear and shame. His lips moved, barely a whisper. "Dad," a wave of gasps swept through the courtroom. Samuel felt every eye turn toward him. The secret he hadn't even known was now exposed. He straightened slowly, forcing air into his lungs. Order, he needed order. "Silence in the court," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. The gavel struck, loud and final. But inside, everything was breaking. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Linda Morales, rose to her feet. "Your Honor, is there an issue? Do you know the defendant?" Every word cut like a blade. Samuel paused. The law was clear. A judge must recuse himself in cases involving personal relationships. He knew that. He had enforced that rule himself many times, yet his mouth felt dry. "Yes," he said slowly, "the defendant is my son." A low murmur rolled through the room. Morales didn't hide her surprise. Then, with respect, "Your Honor, this is a clear conflict of interest. I request that you step down from this case immediately." The defense attorney, Mark Holloway, stood as well. "I agree, Your Honor. This trial cannot proceed under these circumstances." All eyes waited for his answer. Samuel looked down at Daniel again. Daniel's shoulders were shaking. He looked like a frightened child. And in that moment, Samuel didn't see a criminal. He saw his son. Yet another thought struck him, cold and heavy. What if he really did it? He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. "You're both right," he said. "This court will recess for 10 minutes while arrangements are made to assign another judge." The gavel struck again. The sound echoed like a gunshot. In his private chambers, Samuel sank into his chair. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his ears. How had this happened? He hadn't spoken to Daniel in almost a year. Their last conversation had been bitter, about Daniel dropping out of college, about money, about his choices in life. Samuel had said things he regretted. Daniel had stormed out, slamming the door. Now this. A knock came at the door. "Your Honor," it was the bailiff. "The chief judge is on the line." Samuel picked up the phone. "Samuel," came the voice of Judge Reynolds, old and tired. "I heard what happened." "Yes," Samuel replied. "I'll step aside, assign someone else." There was a pause. "I would," Reynolds said slowly, "but there's a problem. Judge Miller is sick. Judge Thompson is out of town, and Judge Allen recused herself this morning due to another case." Samuel frowned. So, Reynolds continued, "we have no one else available today. This trial has already been delayed twice. The media is here. The families are here." Samuel stood up. "Then postpone it again." Another pause. The law allows you to continue if both sides agree, Reynolds said. But it will be your call and theirs. Samuel felt a chill. You're asking me to judge my own son. I'm asking if you believe you can be fair, Reynolds replied. Fair, the word echoed in his mind. After a moment, Reynolds added, talk to the attorneys. See what they say. The line went dead. Samuel stared at the phone. What kind of choice was this? Back in the courtroom, tension hung in the air. The clerk announced the situation. No replacement judge. A decision had to be made. Morales, the prosecutor, spoke first. Your Honor, this is highly unusual, but given the circumstances and the seriousness of the charges, the state is willing to proceed if you believe you can remain impartial. All eyes turned to Holloway. The defense attorney hesitated, then nodded slowly. My client has agreed as well. He says he trusts his father to do what's right. Samuel's chest tightened. Daniel looked up at him, eyes pleading. The room waited. Samuel returned to the bench. His legs felt heavy, but he stood tall. This court will proceed, he said. But let it be known, in this courtroom I am not a father, I am a judge, and I will follow the law to the letter. The gavel struck. The trial began. The charge, armed robbery and murder. A convenience store clerk shot dead during a late-night robbery. The suspect, Daniel Carter. Samuel felt each word like a hammer to his chest. Morales began her opening statement, pacing before the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, this case is simple. On the night of May 14th, the defendant entered a convenience store on 8th Street, demanded money at gunpoint, and when the clerk hesitated, he pulled the trigger. The victim, Mr. Alan Reed, died at the scene. Surveillance footage places the defendant there. A witness will testify they saw him fleeing, and the murder weapon was found in his apartment. She turned and pointed at Daniel. This was not an accident. This was a choice, and we will prove his guilt beyond any doubt. Samuel avoided looking at Daniel. He couldn't. Holloway stood for the defense. My client pleads not guilty, he said firmly. The evidence will show that while Daniel Carter may have been near the scene, he did not commit this crime. He is being framed. And by the end of this trial, you will see that the truth is far more complicated than it appears. Samuel's eyes snapped up. Framed, his heart beat faster. Could it be possible? The first witness was called, Officer Ryan Brooks, the arresting officer. Brooks described responding to the scene, finding the clerk dead, and later tracking Daniel to his apartment. We found a handgun under his mattress, Brooks testified. Ballistics matched the bullet recovered from the victim. Samuel felt sick. A gun in Daniel's apartment. How could that be explained? Then came the surveillance footage. The screen flickered to life. A hooded figure entered the store. The face was partially visible. The prosecutor zoomed in. It's him, someone whispered in the crowd. Samuel forced himself to look. The grainy image showed a young man with Daniel's build, his jawline, his eyes. It looked like his son. Daniel shook his head violently. That's not me, he mouthed. Samuel's heart was breaking. If this was true, if his son had really done this, what would he do? As the first day drew to a close, the evidence already seemed heavy against Daniel. And yet, something didn't sit right. The footage was blurry. The witness hadn't testified yet. And Daniel's eyes, they weren't the eyes of a killer. They were the eyes of someone terrified. As Samuel adjourned the court for the day, he couldn't stop thinking, is my son a murderer, or is someone using him as the perfect scapegoat? And more terrifying than that, if the truth leads to him, will I have the strength to deliver the verdict? The gavel fell. But for Samuel Carter, the real trial had only just begun. The second day of the trial began under a cloud of tension so thick it felt like the courtroom itself was holding its breath. Judge Samuel Carter barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Daniel in chains. He had gone over the law in his head again and again, reminding himself of his duty. You are not his father here, you are the judge. But the words rang hollow. Nothing could erase the fact that the man on trial was the boy he had raised. As he took his seat, Daniel looked up at him. Their eyes met for just a second. Then Daniel looked away. Samuel struck the gavel. Court is back in session. The prosecution called their key witness. State calls Mrs. Evelyn Parker to the stand. An elderly woman with trembling hands approached, supported by a bailiff. She swore in and sat, adjusting her glasses. Morales smiled gently. Mrs. Parker, where were you on the night of May 14th? I was closing my flower shop, she said, across the street from the convenience store. And did you see anything unusual? Yes, ma'am. I heard a bang like a firecracker. Then I saw a young man run out of the store. He nearly bumped into me. Morales leaned in. Do you see that young man in this courtroom today? Mrs. Parker lifted her gaze and scanned the room. Her eyes settled on Daniel. That's him, she said. I'd recognize that face anywhere. A murmur swept through the courtroom. Daniel's head snapped up. No, he started, but Holloway put a hand on his arm. Samuel's heart sank. Another nail in the coffin. Morales nodded. No further questions. Holloway stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Parker, he said calmly, how far away were you when you saw this man? Oh, maybe 20-25 feet. And it was night, correct? Yes. The streetlights, were they bright? Well, not very. One was flickering, I think. Holloway nodded. And how long did you see the man's face? She hesitated. Just a moment. He was running. So in a dark street, with a flickering light from over 20 feet away, for only a moment, you're certain it was my client. Her lips tightened. I am. Holloway let the silence sit. No further questions. Samuel watched her carefully. She seemed sincere. But certainty didn't always mean truth. Next came the forensic analyst, who confirmed again that the bullet matched the gun found in Daniel's apartment. Everything pointed one way: guilt. By midday, Samuel felt the weight of the evidence pressing down on him like a mountain. Then Holloway called his first witness. Defense calls Daniel Carter. A wave of whispers rushed through the room. Samuel stiffened. This was the moment he had dreaded. Daniel walked to the stand, chains removed, hands shaking. He raised his right hand, took the oath, and sat. For the first time since the trial began, father and son were forced to look directly at each other. Holloway spoke gently. Daniel, tell the court where you were on the night of May 14th. Daniel swallowed. I was near 8th Street, but not in the store. I was meeting someone. Who? My friend Marcus, Morales objected. Your Honor, hearsay unless the witness is present. Overruled for now, Samuel said, his voice steady. The witness may answer. Daniel continued. Marcus said he had a job for me, quick cash. I needed money, so I went. Samuel's jaw tightened. Quick cash, that didn't sound good. What kind of job? Holloway asked. Daniel shook his head. He didn't say, just told me to wait in the alley behind the store. He said he'd be back in 5 minutes. And did he come back? No, Daniel said. I waited, then I heard a bang. I panicked and ran. I didn't even know someone had been shot until the police arrested me the next day. Morales rose for cross-examination, her eyes sharp. Daniel, she said, you expect this court to believe you were just waiting in an alley behind a store that got robbed and shot up? Yes, he said, because that's what happened. And this friend Marcus, full name, Marcus Hale, where is he now? I don't know, Morales raised an eyebrow. Convenient, so there's no one to confirm your story? Daniel clenched his fists. I'm telling the truth. Morales stepped closer. Then explain why the murder weapon was found under your mattress. Daniel's eyes widened. What? I've never seen that gun before. But it was in your apartment, Morales pressed. I don't know how it got there, he said desperately. Someone must have put it there. Morales scoffed. So now you're saying someone framed you? Broke into your home, hid a gun, and just happened to look exactly like you on camera? Yes, Daniel said, because I didn't do this. Morales let the silence linger. Then she spoke coldly. No further questions. Daniel looked broken as he stepped down. Samuel felt like his chest was being torn apart. That afternoon, during a short recess, something unexpected happened. Samuel was alone in his chambers when there was a knock. Come in. The door opened, and Linda Morales stepped inside. Your Honor, she said, may I speak with you privately? Samuel hesitated. About the case? Yes, he frowned. That's highly inappropriate. She nodded. I know, but this isn't about strategy. It's about something you should see. She placed a file on his desk. What is this? He asked. Daniel's background check, she said. We ran it as routine. There's more in there than you might expect. Samuel stiffened. What do you mean? Morales opened the file and slid it toward him. Your son has been arrested twice before, she said quietly. Once for fighting outside a bar. Once for possession of stolen goods. Both charges were dropped. Samuel felt like he'd been punched, arrested. He hadn't known. He also owes money, she continued. A lot of it, gambling debts. That's why we believe he took the job. Samuel's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. This wasn't the boy he remembered. Morales softened her tone. I know this is hard, but you need to understand who he is now, not who he was. Samuel closed the file slowly. I won't look at this, he said. Not unless it's presented in court. Morales nodded. Fair enough, but ask yourself, Your Honor, if this were any other defendant, would you still doubt the evidence? She left. Samuel sat in silence. Would I? He didn't know anymore. Back in court, Holloway called another witness. Defense calls Tom Reed. A young man stepped forward. State your name, Holloway said. Tom Reed, the victim was my father. A hush fell. Holloway nodded respectfully. Mr. Reed, I'm sorry for your loss. Can you tell us if your father had any enemies? Tom hesitated. My dad was in trouble with someone. He mentioned a man who kept coming in late at night, arguing with him about money. Morales shot up. Objection, speculation. Overruled, Samuel said. The witness may answer. Did your father describe this man? Holloway asked. Yes, Tom said. He said he was tall, broad, had a scar on his neck. Samuel's pulse quickened. He glanced at Daniel. Daniel shook his head. No scar, Holloway said calmly. My client has no scar on his neck, correct? Daniel turned his neck slightly, showing smooth skin. Holloway faced the jury. So the man your father feared doesn't match my client. Morales frowned. No further questions, Holloway said. This was the first real crack in the prosecution's case. Samuel felt a flicker of hope, but the biggest shock was yet to come. As the day neared its end, the clerk rushed in with a note. Samuel read it, his eyes widening. He looked up. Mr. Holloway, Ms. Morales approached the bench. They did. Samuel lowered his voice. We've just received information. A man named Marcus Hale was picked up by police this afternoon, trying to leave the city. Holloway's eyes lit up. My client's friend? Morales frowned. Why wasn't he brought in earlier? He was using a fake name, Samuel said, but his fingerprints matched an old record. He's in custody now. A charged silence fell between them. Samuel straightened. Court will adjourn for today. Tomorrow morning, this witness will be brought before us. The gavel struck. Daniel's eyes filled with tears as he was led away. For the first time, hope flickered in his face. Samuel watched him go, his heart pounding. If Marcus is real, then maybe Daniel is telling the truth. But another thought followed, darker. And what if Marcus points the finger right back at him? As the courtroom emptied, Samuel remained seated, staring at the bench. Tomorrow could change everything. For better or for worse. The third day of the trial began with every seat in the courtroom filled. Word had spread overnight. A new suspect. A mysterious friend. The press crowded the back rows, cameras flashing as Judge Samuel Carter took his seat. His face was calm, but inside, his heart was racing. Somewhere in the holding cells beneath the courthouse was Marcus Hale, the man who might save Daniel or bury him forever. Samuel struck the gavel. Court is in session. Bring in the witness. The side door opened. Two officers escorted in a tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 30s. His hands were cuffed, and a faint scar ran along the left side of his neck. Samuel's breath caught. A scar, his eyes went instantly to Daniel. Daniel stared at Marcus, his face pale. That's him, Daniel whispered. Marcus took the stand, smirking slightly as the oath was administered. He looked far too relaxed for a man in custody. Morales rose first. State calls Marcus Hale as a hostile witness. Samuel nodded. Proceed. Morales approached. Mr. Hale, were you with the defendant on the night of May 14th? Marcus leaned back. Yeah, we met up. Where's? Near the convenience store on 8th. A ripple went through the courtroom. And what were you doing there? Marcus shrugged. Just hanging out. Morale's eyes narrowed. Isn't it true that you and Daniel planned to rob that store together? Daniel shot to his feet. That's a lie. Sit down, Samuel ordered, banging the gavel. His voice trembled for the first time. Marcus glanced at Daniel, then back at Morales. Yeah, he said, that's what happened. A gasp swept through the room. Samuel felt the blood drain from his face. Morales pressed on. So you're saying the defendant committed the robbery? Marcus nodded slowly. He went inside. I waited outside. And did you hear a gunshot? Yes. And then what? He ran out, panicking, said he didn't mean to do it. Daniel's face twisted in horror. You're lying. Morales turned to the jury. No further questions. The room buzzed with shock. Samuel felt like the ground beneath him had collapsed. This was it. This was the end. Holloway rose, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. Mr. Hale, he said, you seem very willing to blame my client, but let's talk about you. Marcus smirked. What about me? Isn't it true, Holloway said, that you have prior convictions for robbery? Morales objected. Relevance goes to credibility, Holloway replied. Samuel nodded. Overruled. Marcus shrugged. Yeah, a few years back. And isn't it also true that you were wanted in another state for violating parole? Marcus' jaw tightened. I don't know what you're talking about. Holloway held up a document. Then how do you explain this warrant issued 2 weeks ago? Marcus' smirk faded. So, Holloway continued, you're facing serious time already. Isn't it possible you're testifying against Daniel to cut a deal for yourself? Morales shot up. Objection. Samuel hesitated, then said, overruled. The witness may answer. Marcus clenched his fists. No one promised me anything. Holloway stepped closer. Really? Because I find it interesting that you were picked up trying to leave the city, and suddenly you're ready to confess everything except your own role. Marcus' eyes flickered. Holloway leaned in. Tell us, Mr. Hale, did you go into that store? No, Marcus snapped. He did. Did you have a gun that night? No. Then how did my client's gun end up under his mattress? Marcus hesitated, just for a second. But Samuel saw it. I don't know, Marcus said. Holloway smiled faintly. Funny, because the forensic report shows no fingerprints on that gun, not my client's, not anyone's, which suggests it was wiped clean before being planted. The courtroom stirred. Marcus swallowed. Holloway's voice hardened. Isn't it true, Mr. Hale, that you robbed that store and used Daniel as a convenient alibi and scapegoat? Marcus laughed. That's crazy. Holloway raised a photo. Then explain this. He handed it to the bailiff, who passed it to Samuel. Samuel's eyes widened. It was a still image from a nearby ATM camera, time-stamped just minutes after the shooting. It showed a man pulling off a hood. The face was clearer than the store footage, and around his neck a visible scar. Samuel looked up slowly. Marcus froze. The courtroom erupted. That's him. Someone shouted. Samuel slammed the gavel. Order, order in the court. He stared at Marcus. Mr. Hale, do you recognize this photo? Marcus' jaw clenched. No, but his voice had lost its confidence. Holloway continued. This ATM is 2 blocks from the store. And records show someone withdrew cash using the victim's stolen card. He turned to the jury. That someone matches Mr. Hale. Morales stood, shaken. Your Honor, we were not made aware of this evidence. Holloway nodded. We obtained it last night through a private investigator once we learned Marcus had been detained. Samuel felt his pulse racing. This was huge. He looked at Marcus again. The scar, the resemblance, the timeline, it all pointed away from Daniel. But then Marcus did something unexpected. He laughed. A deep, cold laugh. You think this proves anything? He said. Fine, I'll tell you the truth. The courtroom went silent. Marcus leaned forward. Yeah, I went into the store, but I wasn't alone. Daniel's eyes widened. I didn't pull the trigger, Marcus said. He did. He pointed straight at Daniel. A wave of shock tore through the room. Daniel stood up, shaking. No, you're lying. Marcus' voice rose. You had the gun, you said you just wanted to scare him. Then he hesitated and you lost it. Morales jumped in. So you admit you were there? Marcus shrugged. Yeah, but he's the one who killed that man. The courtroom was chaos. Samuel hammered the gavel again and again. Order, I will have order. His hands were shaking. Marcus had just placed himself at the scene, but still blamed Daniel. Two men pointing fingers, and only one truth. Samuel felt torn apart. Who was lying? Who was telling the truth? The tension snapped when Holloway spoke again, his voice cutting through the noise. Mr. Hale, he said quietly, you forgot one thing. Marcus frowned. What's that? Holloway held up a small evidence bag. Inside was a pair of gloves. These were found in a dumpster near your motel room this morning, Holloway said. They have gunshot residue on them. Morales' eyes widened. Holloway continued, and there's more. The inside of these gloves contains your DNA, not my client's. Marcus' face went pale. The courtroom fell silent. That means, Holloway said, you fired the gun. Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came out. Samuel felt a surge of hope, but Marcus wasn't done. He looked up at Samuel, his eyes suddenly sharp. You really want to know the truth, Judge? He said. Then ask your son why he needed the money so badly. Samuel stiffened. Marcus smiled grimly. Go ahead, ask him about the debts, about the man he owed. Samuel's heart pounded. He looked at Daniel. Daniel looked down, avoided his eyes. Daniel, Samuel said softly, unable to stop himself. Is that true? Holloway shot him a warning look, but it was too late. Daniel swallowed hard. I owe money, yes. The courtroom buzzed. Marcus leaned back. See, he had motive, I just helped him. Samuel felt dizzy. Yes, Marcus looked guilty. Yes, the gloves pointed to him, but Daniel was hiding something too, and Samuel couldn't tell what anymore. He adjourned the court for the day, his mind spinning. That night, alone in his chambers, Samuel received a call, an anonymous voice. You're getting close, Judge, the voice said, but if you want your son to live a normal life, you'll stop this trial tomorrow. The line went dead. Samuel stared at the phone, frozen, a threat. Or a warning. Either way, it meant one thing. This case was bigger than he thought, and the truth was dangerous. Judge Samuel Carter didn't sleep at all. The anonymous call echoed in his mind all night. If you want your son to live a normal life, you'll stop this trial. It wasn't just a threat, it was proof. Proof that someone out there was desperate to bury the truth. By morning, Samuel had made a decision. No matter the cost, he would finish this. The courtroom was packed tighter than ever as he took his seat for the final day. Daniel looked exhausted. Marcus looked nervous for the first time. Samuel struck the gavel. Court is in session. Morales stood. Your Honor, the state requests to recall Marcus Hale for further questioning in light of new evidence. Samuel nodded. Proceed. Marcus returned to the stand, his bravado gone. Morales began, her tone sharp. Mr. Hale, you testified yesterday that the defendant pulled the trigger. But overnight, police analyzed the gloves found near your motel. They contain not only your DNA, but also traces of the victim's blood. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Marcus' face drained of color. So I'll ask again, Morales said. Did you fire the gun? Marcus swallowed. I already said I didn't. Morales leaned closer. Then explain why your gloves are covered in gunshot residue and the victim's blood. Marcus' lips trembled. Silence. Then Holloway stood. Your Honor, may I question the witness? Samuel nodded. Holloway walked slowly toward Marcus. Mr. Hale, you're running out of places to hide, so let's make this simple. Did Daniel Carter ever go inside that store? Marcus hesitated. No, he muttered. Daniel's head snapped up. What? Morales demanded. He waited outside, Marcus admitted. I went in. The courtroom exploded in noise. Samuel slammed the gavel. Order. Marcus' shoulders sagged. I needed money. I knew the clerk kept cash after closing. I didn't mean to kill him. He just reached for the phone. I panicked. Daniel stared at him in shock. So you admit you shot him? Holloway pressed. Marcus nodded slowly. Yes. A wave of emotion rushed through the room. Samuel felt his chest tighten. His son hadn't done it, but something still wasn't right. Samuel leaned forward. "Then why did you blame Daniel?" Marcus looked up at him, eyes dark. "Because I knew no one would question the judge's son, and because someone told me to." The courtroom fell silent. Samuel's heart skipped. "Who?" Marcus hesitated, then said the name. "Richard Vale." Morales froze. Holloway frowned. "The businessman?" Marcus nodded. "He owns half the properties on 8th Street. Your son owed him money, big money." Samuel felt like the air had been sucked from the room. Vale, he knew that name. A powerful developer, generous donor. A man Samuel had sentenced leniently years ago in a fraud case, believing his lies. Marcus continued. "Vale told me if I pinned it on Daniel, he'd make my charges disappear. Said no one would dare dig too deep with the judge involved." Morales whispered, "My God." Samuel closed his eyes. So this was it, the threat, the pressure, the real monster hiding behind power. Samuel opened his eyes, fire burning in them. "Bailiff," he said, "have Richard Vale brought into this courtroom immediately." Within an hour, a well-dressed man in his 50s sat in the witness chair, looking irritated rather than afraid. "Richard Vale," he smiled thinly. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." Samuel stared at him. "So is framing my son for murder." A murmur swept the courtroom. Morales took over. "Mr. Vale, did you contact Marcus Hale after the shooting?" Vale scoffed. "I don't even know this man." Holloway stepped forward and held up a phone record. "Then how do you explain these calls? Your number, his phone, 3 times the night of the murder." Vale's smile faded. Marcus spoke from his seat. "He told me exactly what to say, even planted the gun in Daniel's apartment." Vale shot him a furious look. "You liar." Morales slammed her hand on the table. "Enough. We also have a voice recording from Judge Carter's phone last night." Samuel nodded. "Play it." The courtroom speakers crackled. The anonymous voice filled the room. "If you want your son to live a normal life, you'll stop this trial tomorrow." Morales turned to Vale. "We compared it to your public speeches. Voice match is over 90%. Vale's face turned pale. "This is ridiculous," he stammered. "Circumstantial." Samuel leaned forward, his voice cold. "You threatened a judge. You framed an innocent man, and you manipulated a murderer to protect your money." Vale stood up. "You can't do this. Do you know who I am?" Samuel stood as well. "I know exactly who you are," he said, "and this court is done being afraid of you." "Bailiff," Morales said, "place Richard Vale under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering." The bailiff moved in. Vale tried to pull back, shouting, "This isn't over," but the cuffs clicked shut. The courtroom erupted. Order was restored slowly. Marcus was taken away, now officially confessing to the murder. Vale was led out in chains. Daniel sat frozen, tears streaming down his face. Samuel looked at him. For the first time since this nightmare began, he allowed himself to see his son, but he still had one duty left. The verdict, he turned to the jury. "You have heard the confession of Marcus Hale and the evidence presented. You may deliberate." It didn't take long. When they returned, the foreman stood. "We find the defendant, Daniel Carter, not guilty." A wave of relief crashed through the courtroom. Daniel broke down, sobbing. Holloway placed a hand on his shoulder. Samuel closed his eyes. For a moment, he wasn't a judge. He was just a father whose son had been spared. But when he opened them again, his voice was steady. "This court accepts the verdict. Daniel Carter, you are free to go." The gavel fell. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed, but Samuel ignored them. He found Daniel standing alone near a window. They looked at each other. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Daniel whispered, "I thought you'd hate me even if I was innocent." Samuel swallowed hard. "I was afraid I might," he admitted. "That's why I had to be a judge first." Daniel nodded. "I'm sorry, Dad, for everything, the debts, the lies. I was in trouble, and I didn't know how to ask you." Samuel stepped closer. "You don't ever have to face that alone again." For the first time in years, they embraced, not as judge and defendant, but as father and son. Weeks later, Marcus Hale was sentenced to life in prison. Richard Vale's empire collapsed under investigation, and Judge Samuel Carter submitted his resignation. In his final statement, he wrote, "Justice demands distance, but humanity demands courage. I learned that even when the law breaks your heart, you must still follow it." On his last day, Samuel walked out of the courthouse, no robe, no gavel, just a man waiting for his son. Daniel stood by the steps, smiling. They walked away together. Not toward a courtroom, but toward a second chance.